not everybody produces the same level all the time. It's like flowers. Nothing blooms consistently 365 days out of the year. So if we think of writing your word count as the blooms on your plant, then maybe writer's block is just a period where you are not in bloom, and that's okay. Hello, sunshine, and welcome back to today's episode of the Neurodivergent Creative Podcast. If you tuned in last time, you'll be glad to know that I did water my plants. I did. This is working. The thing where I say something I'm going to do and then do it in between recording these episodes has been really good for me. So now I'm going to challenge you to do a thing. So if you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and put in the comments something that you are going to accomplish between now, when you're watching this, and the next time an episode comes out, which they typically come out on Fridays. So give yourself a challenge. I will cheer you on in the comments. I'll figure out what I'm going to do next sometime as I am recording this one. So today's topic is writer's block and creative blocks. And specifically, I like to talk about writer's block because I mostly coach writers and I work with writers. And that's what a lot of my content and stuff and day-to-day thoughts, that's what it's all about, writing. I like words. I'm a word person. So what is writer's block? Wikipedia defines writer's block, and I have this written down, is a non-medical condition. I love that. They're like, this isn't a like you don't go to the doctor for writer's block. Primarily associated with writing, in which an author is either unable to produce new work or experiences a creative slowdown. What if that's just like part of the process though? Like, not everybody produces the same level all the time. It's like flowers. Like, I have a bunch of flowers growing in my front yard right now, but right now they're all just green plants. And I can see that like stems are coming up with little bulbs on the end, and I know that they're going to blossom into flowers. My iris is going to bloom this year. I'm very excited about the iris. It's been like year 2 since we planted it. And apparently they take a year or 2 to get over the shock of being transplanted. But it's coming up. I'm very pumped. And it's the same way with orchids. So I also keep potted orchids. And in my past life as a greenhouse employee, I was in marketing for a national greenhouse. We had national houseplant brands that are probably in your grocery store right now. We would get calls from people being like, my orchid died. And they would just throw it away. And I'm like, your orchid didn't die. The blooms fell off. Nothing blooms all year. Nothing blooms consistently 365 days out of the year. What happens is the blooms are like how a plant gets pollinated and reproduces, right? Like the bloom is where the seeds come from and where the nectar is and where all the pollinators go to hang out. And then after a time, the blooms will fall off and the plant will focus on regrowing the green parts. It will grow more roots. It will grow more leaves. It will grow and deepen itself and become larger and stronger without the flowers there. So if we think of writing your word count as the blooms on your plant, then maybe writer's block is just a period where you are not in bloom, and that's okay. But we're also going to talk about other things that could be influencing your writer's block. So writer's block, obviously, maybe not obvious. I don't know. Maybe you think it's just an affliction that Zeus gives you sometimes. But primarily, I find that it comes from fear. Fear of the book not living up to the idea that you have in your head about it, fear of finishing it and then having to deal with what comes next. Like if you want to find an agent and get a book deal and get it published traditionally, or whether you want to self-publish, there's just a whole new slew of things to figure out. And so if you find that you are getting blocked as you reach the end of a book or the end of a short story or the end of anything that you're working on, it might be fear of just the next steps that come after finishing it, because the unknown is scary. That's normal. We know that. Fear of people reading it, like people who, like, maybe you shared something really deep and intimate and secret about your life, or maybe you wrote a dirty, sexy smut novel and you're like, my mother's gonna read this. That can be fearful. Fear of sharing it with people and getting judgment. Like, what if they don't like it at all? Is that worse than if they do really like it? Like, can you imagine E.L. James's mom, like, reading 50 Shades of Grey and being like, honey, you did such a good job on this. I really love when he spanked her. Like, I think I would just crawl into a hole. I don't think that I would want my mother to read my smut. Also, on this note, there's a really funny podcast called Dad Wrote a Porno, or My Dad Wrote a Porno. And it's this guy, he's English, I believe, and he discovered that his dad had written, like, an erotica series. And so he reads it on the podcast. And so there's, like, one level of reaction where it's like him just reacting to reading this smut novel aloud. And then the secondary level of him being like, my dad wrote this. And honestly, it's excellent. It's excellent comedy. I still think about it a lot. It's really funny. So to some people, maybe you're not scared of that. And to other people, maybe you are scared of that. There can also be fear of, like, okay, I'm going to finish my first draft and then I'm going to have to revise it. And I don't know how many times I'm going to have to revise it. It just sounds easier to not write the thing at all. I get that. That's a valid fear, because revision can take a long time and you might have to rewrite your book and you might have to do a few more passes than you initially wanted to. I remember being personally offended that I had to revise my book at all. I didn't just create a perfect manuscript on the first try. What do you mean? Yeah. So if you're also personally offended, come to me. I understand you. You are welcome in Caitlin's home for imaginary friends and neurodivergent authors. Maybe that's what I should call working title. That's a little more descriptive. Writer's block can also be executive dysfunction, which we have talked about. In fact, episode 125, just a few episodes before this, has been one of the most popular episodes that I've done. So many people were like, oh, yeah, it feels like my brain is buffering, and I never had the language for that. Yes, borrow it, buffering. Writer's block can also be this kind of buffering thing where you're like, you know that you have ideas, you know some of, like, the characters, you know the world, like, you've got all these pieces, but your brain won't let you just sit down and write it all out coherently in a way that makes sense to you. So frustrating. For that, I recommend my program Novel Parkour. It is a free workshop you can take. I taught it live in March. And so there's, like, 5 days of replays that you can watch, and it breaks down the process of outlining your novel. It is more applicable to novels. So, like, I'm working on a memoir one, but I don't have it yet. But it's free. So, like, worst case scenario, if you're doing a memoir, is like you read it and you kind of mush it together. But check that out. That's free. And I also have a course called You Should Write That Novel that expands on the outlining process and actually helps you, like, plan for the overall writing of your entire first draft. And that course is only $97. So that is my gift to you today, is a free thing or a $100 thing if the executive dysfunction part is where you're getting stuck, because it's freaking hard. And so both of these programs are coming from, like, a neurodivergent ADHD specifically point of view to help you work on that novel. Writer's block can be overwhelm. And this is related to executive dysfunction, but it's like writing a book often has multiple points of view. So, like, you have to keep track of, like, who knows what and which character acts which way. And sometimes there's different timelines, or there's a mystery and you have to pace, like, when you're putting the clues in there. It's a lot of stuff, and it's on you and your brain to, like, keep it all smooth and untangled. And it can get all jumbled up, and you can be like, I don't freaking remember what they're doing next. I keep reading this scene over and I can't remember what I was going for when I wrote it. And it just sucks. Like, it does. Sometimes it sucks to try and hold on to all this stuff in your brain, which is why I made the Novel Parkour spreadsheet, so that you can, like, it's kind of visual. You can, like, see everything laid out in one place. I didn't go into this episode thinking, oh yeah, I'll just pitch novel parkour the whole time. But we're here now, so I'm going to tell you it's really good for that. Writing a book, if you haven't before, and sometimes even if you have, like for instance, my first book, The Gaslighting of the Millennial Generation, that's published, it's nonfiction. So that process was easier for me than a novel where I'm like creating stuff from scratch and I am like making characters do things. And sometimes the characters do things by themselves. And I'm like, I didn't plan for this. So now I have like an entire romantic subplot that was not there in my outline. And now I have to make space for. And I'm like, you're really pissing me off. But anyway, writing a book is inherently going to be a little uncomfortable. It's the expansion of your comfort zone, your capabilities. Like you're learning so much new stuff. You're honing your skills. You are learning new techniques of storytelling. Like maybe you're used to writing in third person and now you want to try it in first person POV, or maybe you want to try like an omniscient POV. One of my clients in Working Title is doing an omniscient POV, and it keeps confusing the hell out of all of us, even me. I'll be like, you change POVs. And then I'm like, wait a minute, that's fine. Because it's the all POV. So yeah, if you're doing new stuff, that's going to feel uncomfortable. And so the inherent response to that is going to be writer's block, or what we know as writer's block. It's going to be like an overwhelm, executive dysfunction thing, but we don't have to tell the normies that. They can call it writer's block if that makes them happy. It can also be a sign of boredom. If you have ADHD, keeping things, pun intended, keeping things novel is a really important part of like keeping your brain engaged. Things have to stay dopamine. They have to stay a little fun. They have to stay a little engaging. And so if you're doing the same thing day after day, your brain can get kind of bored and be like, I don't want to work on that today. I want to do something else today. So what can help in this situation is adding a little gamification. And we've talked about gamification before, like rolling a 20-sided die and you've made a list of 20 things. Now, some of my clients have to write in order. Like they have to start at chapter 1 and go forward. Other clients can totally like just jump around. They'll be like, well, I feel like writing all the battle scenes today. So I'm going to write all the battle scenes, or I'm going to write all of the relationship building scenes, or I'm just really feeling into these two characters today. So I'm going to write their scenes together. If you are a jumper arounder, make a list of 10 to 20 scenes and then roll a 10 or 20-sided die. It helps if you come from a geeky, nerdy household because you will just have dice all over the place that you can roll. So if you don't have dice, go to your local gaming store and get a set of polyhedral dice. Or you can also buy them on Etsy or basically anywhere online or any kind of convention. I got some that a friend made me that are by Pride flag colors. So it's pink and purple and blue, and I love them. And I think I have another set that's non-binary colored, or it might just be like blue. It's like blue with like galaxies. Doesn't matter. Buy some dice. Buy some dice. That's my advice to you. And then you make a list of your scenes, roll the die, and then the die chooses what to do next. Haha. I believe this was also recommended in that executive dysfunction episode because it's good advice. If you can make a list and then roll dice about it, your brain's just going to be like, sure, okay, I love that. If you have ADHD. If you don't have ADHD, then you probably don't need this. Why are you here? Say hi in the comments so I know like that you're here, but how did you find me? Are you in my house? What's going on? You could also draw like a tarot card or an oracle card and let that guide your scene. So if you're like, oh, I'm bored today, blah, 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 draw a card. And then if it doesn't fit like in your outline and like your book, don't actually write it as part of your book, but it can be like a little writing exercise. Like how would my character react if, I don't know, he was up against a guy carrying a bunch of swords? Okay. And that's just like a literal translation of a tarot card. Or you can be vibey with it, right? Like say you get death. Like where in my book is my character going to experience like an ego death and reinvent themselves? Go write that scene. Anything that just gives you a little bit of novelty. Writer's block can also be perfectionism. And this is something that I deal with like every day with my writing clients because we were gifted kids. and we are perfectionists and we want gold stars and A pluses. But let me tell you, there is no rubric for writing a novel. There's no rubric for writing a memoir. And the reason that we were so good at just pulling something out of our ass in school is because we knew what the teacher wanted and we knew the rubric, and we were like, okay, well, as long as I have like a thesis statement and a concluding paragraph and like 5 pages of stuff with sources, it doesn't even have to like make that much sense or be that compelling. The teacher's just looking to check off these boxes. That is not the case here, my babies. It is not the case here. You actually want your book to be really compelling and for readers to really connect with it. You don't want them to skim it and check off the boxes and be like, yes, you get an A on this book. Books are different than papers. And the perfectionism thing of like having been able to pretty much wing it at a lot of stuff in high school, college. Man, I remember trying to wing stuff in grad school and the teacher being like, why is this in bullet points? This could have been paragraphs. And I'm like, because you made me write like 8 pages about a book that only had like 2 plot points. You're killing me. Everybody hated that assignment. Dr. Iverson, I hope you're still not doing that frickin' assignment. Because it was terrible. But back to the perfectionism thing. It can either be that like sort of academic rubric thing, or it can also be like well, I need to like research and make sure that my outline is super airtight and get all my research done. And I want to read some comps and I want to make sure that I have all the details so that then all I have to do is just let the words fall where they may, and then my novel will be done. That is a way to do it. There are authors who outline extensively, like huge outlines, super detailed. And then when they write the manuscript happens really fast on the surface, like what we see. If they're like, yeah, I wrote this manuscript in 6 months. Well, okay, but did they outline it for a year or 18 months or 2 years before that 6 months where they wrote the manuscript? Like, there at some point there will be a point where you have to just start writing. And that's what I work with people on, is just let it be messy, let it be imperfect, let it be chaotic, let yourself just leave a little note, like, gotta look this up next time. You're going to hate that in revision, but I promise it gets the draft written. So those are my 5 things that writer's block could be. Could be fear of various things, executive dysfunction / overwhelm, boredom, or perfectionism. So if you are prone to writer's block, drop it in the comments or shoot me a DM. If you listen to it on Spotify or somewhere, go catch me on Instagram. Let's talk about your writer's block. And if you are interested in novel parkour, or you should write that novel, my very clever title for my writing course, I'll put those links in the show notes. And I'll see you next time. Oh, and I didn't come up with any things to do in my room. I guess I will, this one's a free space, this episode. So you tell me in the comments what you're going to do between episodes. That'll be our challenge this week. Okay, I'll see you later. I love you, and there's nothing you can do about it.